The signal pulsed in the darkness. A faint transmission, encoded in a language the galaxy had long forgotten. The kind of thing that shouldn't exist, not after what the Concorde had done to Earth. Commander Dane Verrick sat at the head of the war table, eyes fixed on the flickering projection. A garbled, corrupted message. The voice behind it was lost to distortion, but the words, those words, were unmistakable. English. The others in the war room were silent. "This is a hoax," muttered Admiral Kasich, the heavy-set reptilian shifting in his seat. Humanity was erased. "We saw to that." Verrick's eyes didn't leave the transmission. "We saw their worlds burn. But we never found the bodies." Silence. No one wanted to admit it. There was no record of humanity's extinction. No final battle logged. The official records simply stopped. The last known human colony, designated Alpha 99, had gone dark 3,000 years ago. The Concorde had sent a purge fleet, 100 dreadnoughts, thousands of warships. They expected a slaughter. Instead, they found emptiness. The colony's entire population had vanished. No wreckage. No bodies. No trace. That was the last time the Concorde dared to look for them. Until now. "This could be anything," Kasich said again, but his voice was quieter this time. Verrick finally spoke. "The transmission is real." He leaned forward, his armored knuckles tapping against the metal table. "The coordinates lead to the dead zone. No active civilizations. No trade routes. No reason for a signal to exist." Admiral Kasich's yellow eyes flickered. "What are you suggesting?" Verrick stood. "The decision was already made. I'm going to find out." The fleet arrived at exclusion zone Z13 3 cycles later. A dozen Concorde warships, cutting through empty void. No planets. No stars. Just a vast, lightless abyss, a place the Concorde had scrubbed from every navigational chart. The signal was stronger now. A heartbeat in the dark. Verrick stood at the bridge, hands folded behind his back. "Bring it up." The transmission flared to life. For the first time, the words were clear. "Turn back. You have one warning. No second chances." A shiver ran through the crew. Even the veterans, hardened killers, felt it. Captain Vosk, a seasoned officer, swallowed hard. "Sir, I." "Move forward," Verrick ordered. The ships advanced. Minutes passed. The blackness yawned around them. No planets. No stars. No threats. Verrick exhaled through his nose. Humanity was a myth. A dead language echoing from a forgotten station. Nothing more. Then the first ship vanished. One moment, the CNS Valor was there, an armored battlecruiser, bristling with weaponry. Then, nothing. No explosion. No impact. Just, gone. Silence slammed into the bridge like a thunderclap. "What the hell? Where is the Valor?" Captain Vosk shouted. "The readings," the technician was stammering. Sir, it wasn't destroyed. It was just deleted." Verrick's blood ran cold. Then the lights flickered. The ship's AI interface sputtered and died. Consoles froze. Weapons shut down. And for the first time in his career, Commander Dane Verrick felt fear. "Red alert, all systems online, now." The second ship vanished. The third ship turned against them. Warning sirens screamed as the CNS Dominion spun in place, its turrets locking onto its own fleet. A barrage of plasma tore through the CNS Fury, ripping it apart. What in the name of? Then the voice came. A guttural, ancient voice, rising from every speaker, from every radio, from the air itself. It spoke in fluent Concordian. "You were warned." The ship lurched. Verrick was slammed against the console. The bridge tilted. Metal screamed. The CNS Wrath, his own flagship, was being dragged. But there were no ships. No visible enemies. Nothing. Then, movement. Not ships. Figures. They walked in space. They moved with impossible precision, warping through the void, leaving distortions in their wake. Humans. Or something that had once been human. Their armor shifted like liquid shadow, their visors a piercing burning white. And they were inside the ship. Varric's sidearm was in his hand before he realized he had drawn it. The first figure appeared before him. Not a hologram. Not a transmission. A real, physical presence. A human. A woman, tall, armored, her glowing white eyes locked onto his. Her voice was calm, quiet. "Do you understand now?" Varric didn't answer. His fleet was gone. The bridge was silent. She tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. Then she lifted a single finger, and reality cracked. His eyes snapped open. He was somewhere else. No bridge. No ship. Just darkness. Then a single voice. "We are still here. Do not come looking again." He woke screaming. The Concord Senate loomed before him, his trial. Commander Varric, the High Chancellor said coldly, "You claim your fleet was annihilated. That your ships were, what? Taken? Destroyed? Vanished into thin air?" Varric couldn't answer. The War Council. The white eyes. The voice. The Concord's greatest fleet was gone. And he was the only one left. The Chancellor leaned forward. "Do you have any proof, Varric?" He didn't. No logs. No recordings. No evidence. It was as if the mission had never happened. A cold dread settled in Varric's chest. The only proof was what still echoed in his mind. We are still here. And for the first time in his life, Varric understood fear. The darkness was absolute. The silence, suffocating. Commander Dane Varric had known battle, had stared death in the face more times than he could count, but this was something else. This was erasure. His fleet, his entire command, was gone. And he was alone. A single light flickered ahead. White, cold, and unblinking. Varric forced his feet forward, his armor heavier than it had ever felt before. His hands ached to reach for his weapon, but something inside him whispered that it would be useless. He had seen the valor disappear in an instant. The wrath twisted inside out. The dominion turn against itself. He had been powerful once. But here, in this space, he was nothing. The light grew, and with it came sound. A slow, deliberate clicking, like metal on stone. Then, a voice smooth, measured, unshaken. "You were given a warning." Varric stopped. The figure before him was human. Or, at least, it wore the shape of one. Armor dark as the void, shifting like liquid steel. A visor that pulsed with an eerie, burning white light. It did not breathe. It did not shift its weight. It merely existed. Varric's jaw clenched. If this is humanity, you've made a mistake. The Concord. The Concord is irrelevant. The words struck like a hammer. He had heard 1,000 threats, survived 100 campaigns. But never had an enemy spoken to him like this. With certainty. With absolute indifference. "You think we are playing a game," the figure continued. "That this is a war. That you will regroup, retaliate, conquer." It stepped closer. Varric refused to move. He refused to be cowed. "You do not understand what you have done," the figure said. "Then explain it," Varric growled. Silence. Then, the world shifted. One moment, he was standing in the darkness. The next, he was there. Earth. Not as he had imagined it, not the burning ruin from the Concord archives, not a dead planet lost to time. But a fortress. Vast monolithic towers stretched beyond sight. Orbital defenses shimmered in layered grids, each one bending space in ways that should not be possible. And beyond the planet, in the abyss of space, a fleet that had no beginning and no end. Ships not made of metal, but something else. Something alive. Verrick staggered. His breath caught in his throat. The voice returned, but now it came from everywhere. We were not destroyed. We did not fade. We watched. We learned. He turned, but there was no source. Just the words, pounding through his skull. Do you know why we let the Concorde believe we were gone? Verrick's fists clenched. Because you were afraid. A laugh. Cold. Empty. Not human at all. Afraid? The voice dripped with amusement. No. We left because we were tired of cleaning up your messes. The sky above him shifted. The image of Earth warped, flashes of war. Not Concorde fleets against human forces, but something else. Aliens Verrick had never seen before. Weapons that should not exist. A history that had been erased. The Concorde came to destroy us once, the voice said. But they were not the first. They will not be the last. We spent centuries cleaning up your wars. Your invasions. Your endless, pitiful struggle to control the stars. The images flickered, Concorde forces crushed by something unseen. Species Verrick had never encountered, wiped from existence. Entire civilizations that had challenged humanity and simply vanished. Do you understand now? The voice asked. This is not a battle. This is a containment. You are not the threat. We are. Verrick gritted his teeth. Then why warn us? Why let me live? The space around him rippled. The towering monoliths of Earth flickered, as if they were not buildings, but something more. Because we wanted you to see. The air cracked. Verrick stumbled, falling to one knee. Go home, Commander. Tell them. Tell the Senate. Tell the Concorde. Tell them exactly what you saw here. The ground beneath him vanished. The world collapsed. And he fell. He gasped awake. Pain. Searing, burning pain. His body trembled. His lungs ached. He was on a ship. His ship. The bridge of the CNS Wrath. Except, it was whole. There were no alarms. No wreckage. No signs of battle. As if it had never happened. But Verrick remembered. His fists curled. His pulse thundered. His crew was there, watching him in confusion. Sir? Captain Vosk's voice was careful, uncertain. Are you, all right? Verrick staggered to his feet. His vision blurred. His mind reeled. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. And yet, he had seen it. He had stood on Earth. He had heard their voices. Sir, Vosk pressed, we just arrived in the Z-13 sector. Should we proceed? His breath hitched. His throat was dry. His mind screamed. They had just arrived. But the fleet was. He turned to the console, fingers trembling. The transmission. Still there. Still pulsing. Still waiting. A cold weight settled in Verrick's chest. He turned to Vosk, his voice calm. Turn us around, he ordered. Vosk hesitated. Sir? Now. The fleet did not enter Z-13 that day. And for the first time in the Concorde's history, a fleet retreated without battle. Verrick sat alone in his quarters, staring at his hands. His fingers trembled. His breath was uneven. Because he knew, somewhere, somehow, they were watching. And they had let him live. Not out of mercy. Not out of weakness. But because they had already won. The Concorde Senate stood in silent judgment. The room was vast, sterile, a monument to the galaxy's ruling power. Rows of officials lined the circular chamber, their eyes fixed on the lone figure standing before them. Commander Dane Verrick. He was not the man who had left for the Z-13 sector. He was something else now, something broken, something changed. His jaw was tight, his shoulders squared, but there was something in his eyes that unsettled even the most seasoned of the Senate members. Chancellor Voris leaned forward, tapping his claws against the polished metal desk. You returned to us with nothing. No ships. No data. No proof. Just the word of a single man. Verrick did not move. I was spared. The chamber remained still. Chancellor Voris's expression twisted in distaste. You expect us to believe that a single fleet, a Concord annihilation force, was destroyed by ghosts? You, a man who has led planetary campaigns, who has slaughtered billions for our cause, expect us to believe that you ran because of a story? Verrick's eyes met his. No. I expect you to believe me because I am still alive. A murmur rippled through the Senate. The words sat heavy, each syllable drenched in a finality that no one wanted to acknowledge. Verrick exhaled slowly, his voice even, controlled. We weren't attacked. We weren't invaded. We weren't at war. We were removed. Chancellor Voris scoffed. Elaborate. Verrick's fingers curled into a fist. The memory was still fresh. The cold, sterile air of the chamber did nothing to wash away the sensation of standing before something not meant to be understood. I gave the order to move forward, Verrick began. Our sensors picked up no threats, no enemy fleet, no defenses. But then, they started vanishing. Not destroyed. Not disabled. Just, gone. He let the words settle. The Valor was the first to go. Then the Wrath. No explosions. No wreckage. Just, erasure. And then they spoke. A hushed silence filled the chamber. They spoke? Voris repeated, his voice laced with skepticism. Verrick nodded. Not in threats. Not in negotiations. In warnings. They had already won. We were being corrected. Like a mistake erased from a ledger. He could still hear it. That voice, quiet yet absolute. Turn back. No second warning. Verrick's voice hardened. And when we didn't listen, they showed us. His fists clenched. I saw Earth. Several Senate members scoffed at once. Impossible, one muttered. That planet was. Verrick cut him off. It was waiting. He let the words hang. He wanted them to feel the weight of it. Earth was not destroyed. It was not abandoned. It is a fortress. More than that, it is something we cannot comprehend. Voris's eyes narrowed. You're claiming that a single species, one that our ancestors supposedly wiped from existence, survived, outmaneuvered us, and now possesses technology beyond our understanding? Verrick did not blink. I am saying that we never understood them to begin with. He stepped forward, voice sharp as a blade. They let us think we won. They let us think they were dead. Because it was easier than the alternative. Voris sneered. And what is the alternative, Commander Verrick? Verrick's lips barely parted, but the words that left his mouth felt absolute. That we were never a threat to them in the first place. A cold hush fell over the room. You speak madness, one of the older council members spat. The Concord has ruled unchallenged for millennia. If what you say is true, if these creatures have existed for all this time, why have they not attacked? Verrick turned his head slowly. His stare was razor-sharp. They don't need to. A murmur rippled through the chamber again. We are children playing with knives, Verrick said. We brandish them like weapons, thinking we have power. But they are not like us. They don't fight wars. They don't conquer planets. His breath was steady, voice low. They decide who gets to exist. Chancellor Voris let out a slow exhale. He should have laughed. He should have dismissed the man standing before him as insane. But Verrick's words felt too certain. Too final. You claim they let you live, Voris said after a moment. Why? The memory burned behind Varric's eyes. The figures, clad in armor that wasn't armor. The eyes that weren't eyes. The voice that whispered into his very mind. Tell them. His voice was grave. Because they wanted me to deliver a message. The chamber bristled. And what message is that? Voris pressed. Varric looked at him directly. They are still here. No one spoke. And they are watching. A single pulse ran through the chamber. A flicker of uncertainty. Then, in the center of the room, the lights flickered. Just for a fraction of a second. A glitch. A momentary anomaly. And yet, Varric saw it. The shadows shifted. Just enough to suggest that someone was there. Watching. He let out a slow breath, tilting his head slightly. He wasn't sure if they were here. If they had always been here. Voris slammed his hand onto the table. Enough of this. We are the Concord. We do not cower before ghosts. I say we send a fleet. A real fleet. Billions of warships, a full planetary invasion. If these creatures exist, then we will. The chamber lights cut out. Darkness. Not a single emergency system activated. No warning sirens. No movement. Just silence. Then a sound. A whisper. Not spoken. Not transmitted. Felt. No. The lights snapped back on. No one moved. No one breathed. Varric's heart pounded against his ribs. His fingers trembled. He hadn't imagined it. He knew. They had been here. And now, so did the Senate. Chancellor Voris swallowed hard, his expression frozen. For the first time, there was fear in his eyes. Varric exhaled slowly. You wanted proof, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He turned away from them, walking toward the exit. There it is. He did not wait for their response. Because it did not matter anymore. The warning had already been given. The silence stretched long after Varric left the chamber. No one dared speak. No one moved. The Chancellor, the admirals, the war strategists, all of them sat frozen in the wake of what had just happened. A single whisper had shattered the illusion of their power. Chancellor Voris exhaled, slow and controlled, forcing the room back to order. He squared his shoulders, eyes hard. This changes nothing. His voice was firm, but the tremor in his fingers betrayed him. Admiral Kasic's scales rippled, his deep-set yellow eyes locked on the Chancellor. It changes everything. If they've been watching us, waiting. They are one species. Voris snapped, standing. And they will be dealt with. This paranoia is unbecoming of. The chamber doors hissed open. A breathless officer sprinted inside, uniform disheveled, his face pale. Chancellor. The young officer stopped just short of collapsing. You need to see this. Voris scowled. We are in the middle of A. It's the capital, sir. Every planet. The words cut through the chamber like a blade. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the room. A live feed from the Concord's core worlds. Hundreds of planets, each one a shining beacon of their empire. And above every single one, hanging motionless in space, were the ships. Silent. Unmoving. Undetectable by scanners. Black, shifting constructs that blotted out the stars. No weapons fired. No threats made. Just a presence. An inescapable certainty hanging over their heads. The room erupted. They've breached our systems. Where did they come from? This is an act of war. Voris's voice cracked like a whip. Enough. The chaos died instantly. His jaw tightened as he stared at the impossible sight. How many? The officer swallowed hard. Every major Concord world, sir. Simultaneously. No fleet movements. No warp signatures. They were just there. Kasich took a slow step forward. No transmissions? The officer shook his head. Just this. The hologram shifted. A symbol flickered into view. Not a crest. Not a flag. Just a single, unbroken ring. Then a message. Text, simple and absolute. Translated into every language the Concord had ever known. We are still here. Do not come looking again. Nothing more. No demands. No negotiations. Just a statement. Vorus's fingers curled into a fist. This is a bluff. The words sounded hollow even as he said them. Admiral Kasich exhaled, slow and deliberate. That's what Vurick thought. Vorus turned sharply. We cannot let this stand. We are the rulers of the known galaxy. We have crushed every rebellion, shattered every fleet that dared rise against us. They cannot simply appear and expect us to bow. They aren't asking us to bow, Kasich murmured. They are giving us a choice. Vorus's expression darkened. Which is? Kasich met his gaze. To live. A cold weight settled over the room. Vorus scoffed. You're suggesting we surrender? Kasich shook his head. I'm suggesting we understand. The Chancellor's voice was low, dangerous. Understand what, Admiral? That we are alive because they allow it. Vorus's anger flared. No species, no matter how advanced, can hold an entire galactic empire hostage. Kasich looked back at the hologram. The ships remained unmoving, silent, like sentinels waiting for an answer. They already have. Vorus turned to the war strategists. Prepare the fleet. All of it. No one moved. He slammed his fist against the console. Now. A strategist swallowed hard. Sir, our forces. Our forces are the strongest in history. Vorus's voice thundered. We will burn their world from existence. We will show them what happens when the Concord is threatened. Kasich exhaled sharply. That's exactly what they want. Vorus rounded on him. Explain. Kasich didn't blink. They could have killed us already. But they didn't. They let us see. They let Vurick live. They let you make a choice. Vorus sneered. You're suggesting we do nothing? No, Kasich said, voice cold. I'm suggesting we listen. Vorus turned back to the hologram. The black ships, the ringed symbol, the message that was not a threat, but a warning. His throat tightened. He thought back to the whisper in the chamber. No. He wanted to dismiss it. Wanted to pretend it hadn't happened. But deep down, in the pit of his stomach, he knew. They were listening. They had always been listening. Kasich's voice was quiet but unshakable. Do you know what's worse than being conquered? Vorus clenched his jaw. What? Kasich didn't look away from the ships. Being ignored. Silence fell. No counterarguments. No retorts. Just the quiet weight of realization. The Concord had spent millennia believing they were the greatest force in the universe. That their rule was absolute. That their word was law. But in the end, they weren't even a threat. They were just insignificant. The black ships remained, waiting. The choice was theirs. Vorus's fingers twitched. A war raged in his mind. His entire existence had been built on the idea that the Concord ruled all. That no force, no rebellion, no civilization, no species could ever rise above them. And yet, he swallowed. His next words came slow, as if it pained him to say them. Stand down. Gasps rippled across the chamber. Vorus's face was carved from stone, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. We do nothing. We pull back all expeditions. No fleets. No communications. We do not engage. Someone tried to object, but Vorus's glare silenced them. This is not surrender, he said. This is survival. His words were bitter, but they were final. The Senate room fell into heavy silence. Outside, the ships remained. No movement. No sound. Just watching. Then, one by one, they disappeared. No flash of light. No jump signatures. No ripple in space. They were just gone. As if they had never been there to begin with. The message remained. We are still here. Do not come looking again. And for the first time in the history of the Concorde, they obeyed.